Well, looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. You guys are in for a treat. We have the amazing Dr. Vivian Asamoah, an integrative GI doc, going to talk to us all about gut health, what you need to do, what you need to know for a very healthy body, mind, spirit. Lately it's been clear that there's a connection in the body, mind, spirit. So, without further ado, Dr. Vivian Asamoah, welcome. Can we start by letting you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Adebo. Am I saying it right?
Yes, right.
Yes, hi. I'm Dr. Vivian Asamoah. I'm a board certified gastroenterologist based in Houston, Texas. My practice is actually located in West Houston, so that's Katy. And my passion is really to integrate the best of both worlds. So, conventional gastroenterology with an integrated functional medicine, more holistic approach. My patient population is predominantly adult. So when you said talk about peds, I said, well, I could. Microbiome is microbiome, and it really starts in utero. So I'm really honored to be on your platform today.
Thank you, Dr. Asamo. So let's start. What is gut microbiome? What is gut health? It's been a buzzword. We've been hearing it a lot. So can you summarize it and tell us what it is in short?
Yeah, I think it's been a buzzword, just like you said, Dr. Adebo, because over the last 2, 3 decades, since the Human Microbiome Project and everything came about, we have noticed the impact of the microbes in our gut in terms of how they interact with the rest of the human body. And so we are finding that the microbiome, which is basically trillions of organisms, bacteria, archaea, viruses, parasites, fungi, that coexist in a symbiotic way in our gut to do various different things, which we are continue to learn about more and more every day. We know they have different functions in our gut. So it's almost like we can't exist without that microbiome. We can't exist without that symbiotic relationship. They help us break down food, they activate enzymes, they help in production of micronutrients, they are responsible for the motility of our gut. They are responsible for the immune system. So 70% of our immune system resides in our gut. They are responsible for the production of neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin, and hence the gut brain axis connection. So, as we evolve as humans, we are actually learning more about how important these microorganisms are to our daily, more than beyond just gut health, our overall well being as human beings. And that's why I think there's so much attention and focus on it right now. It's like, can every issue be reconnected down to what's happening in the gut?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. So, what has been the problem over the last few decades? What has disrupted our gut health lately? I'd let you, talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I wonder what you would say in terms of for children, looking at things really from a pediatric perspective. What do you see in your experience that has disrupted? Since I don't deal too much with the children's population, I'd love to hear your input on that.
I think the overall problem in this day and age we live in is our food, right? Our foods are more processed. They lack in nutrients, in fiber. Um, that has been the trend, right?
Yeah,
So if in your experience, have you
yeah.
seen more issues related to gut health lately than maybe years ago? Obviously
I
we
think
don't live in the 1990s when
yes,
there wasn't
yes,
a lot of
yes,
industrialization and things, but
exactly.
from your reading, from your research.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% correct. I mean, I think it's probably a combination of things, but I think it's the evolution of mankind, right? Stemming from when we discovered antibiotics and our overuse of antibiotics, even in children, right? How often often do parents go into an urgent care and they get repeated antibiotics, and that really hits the gut microbiome significantly. And so those are often the people I see in their adulthood with chronic gut issues and IBS like symptoms. And when you review the history with them, they may have received 2, 3 courses of antibiotics every year till they were about 14, 15 for something or the other. So I
Mhm.
think that definitely has played a role, and medicine has played a role in there too, right? Evolution of things and not letting things heal sometimes naturally. I do think processed foods definitely play a big role. It's just been the evolution of the food industry over time. And it's not only the processing, but the addition of things like emulsifiers and additives to stabilize and provide these food with more longevity so you can have them on the shelf for a long period of time. And so there's a combination of environmental toxins that come into play, right? These additives and things are all environmental toxin, and how we even store our food, right? In terms of children and using BPA plastic bottles, which we had to change. And once we decided to eliminate BPA, so those are all toxins that we know at long term by bioaccumulation will impact the microbiome. So just like you said, it's complex, it's diverse, but I do believe it's the evolution of mankind, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, very good. Could you talk about prebiotic and probiotics, what they are, and just a general overview for our audience?
Yeah.
And then
I
I
always
think,
say,
sorry, there's a background noise too, I think.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Is the door open? Is it something we can do? If not,
No, as you will see, this is not my palace. I'm sitting somewhere.
oh,
And
okay,
so,
no worries. No
yes.
worries then.
So forgive the background noise.
Yeah.
So in terms of prebiotics, I always tell patients those are like free probiotics. You can get them naturally through the food that you're already consuming, right? These are natural products, wholesome raw foods that will enrich the existing microbiome in your gut, right? And so examples of prebiotics are like very good sources of fermented milk, like kefir, things that are foods that are fermented, like sauerkraut, if that's of interest, kimchi. But basic things like onions and garlic are great sources of prebiotics and healthy fibers. All of these foods we know will help enrich the gut microbiota where you don't necessarily need probiotics. So probiotics are coming after the fact, but prebiotics are sort of the foods that nourish the healthy microbiome.
Right, yeah. So, like we talked about with the evolution of the food processing and industry, most of the standard American food lacks in fiber, and the processing
Yes,
removes all that fiber. And, the busy lifestyle most families lead has made it difficult to prepare whole nutritious food. And so we may run into fast foods or
yes,
prepackaged grocery store foods that you can microwave and eat.
right.
Makes it made it convenient, but it comes with a cost of one, tons of chemicals, like you said, that disrupt the gut flora as well as the gut lining. Leaky gut syndrome is something we've been hearing a lot lately, that our food doesn't nourish the gut microbiome as well as it lacks in a lot of nutrients, fiber, lots of good things that our body needs, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are ways to restore and reverse. And as you rightly said, really minimizing processed foods from a very early age. I think that adults, and looking at things from both perspectives, and being a mother myself, I think it's very easy for us to sometimes give into what children want to eat and what they will say they can eat. But we can educate our children. And I think it's super important to start early, because a bad microbiota, or if you develop a bad microbiota, can really cause other issues down the road. So As you're developing this bad microbiota, in that instance, you may not have symptoms, but over the years, as your child grows up, they may develop other systemic issues. So, really having um, very, very early conversations with your children about gut health and reading labels and helping them understand what is processed versus not processed. And there's some great books for kids. There's some great children's book that tell you about raw foods and wholesome foods and how important that is. And if you can't pluck it from the earth or cut it, then it's a processed food. So very simple strategies. And even in how to read labels, there are great videos on YouTube that help children learn, when you turn it around, what are you looking for? How do you read labels? And if we can start early, then it really helps us through the years as they grow
Mhm.
older. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are practical ways of families may want to remove a certain food that may be harmful to the microbiome, and what may be better to replace them with? You've mentioned fermented foods and fiber, but if you could elaborate on what are some of the practical foods that our children may be consuming daily that lack the fiber that may be harmful to our microbiome.
Yeah. So as you said, anything that's really fast food that you are getting from a drive-by, and I'm like, people think Chick-fil-A is healthy. It is not, right? But there are potentially foods that you can get at Chick-fil-A that will be a little bit healthier for your gut, because sometimes you're on the run. You don't really have time to have a prepared cooked meal. So opting for a salad, opting for a wrap, right? A wrap that contains maybe avocados and lettuce and fresh tomatoes and things like that will be better. So actually making better selective choices if you do have to eat fast food. And then the second thing I would say, well, fast food. The second thing I would say is avoid buying processed packaged food. Food that can sit on the shelf for a long time. And I'm a really, really, really strong believer in the choice of cereal that you buy for your children. We use cereal is one of the most processed foods. We give it to children all the time, but truly, there are very little benefits. It's completely processed from start to finish. Like, there's no little round grains that exist in nature covered with blue and pink and red that comes out naturally like that. And unlike many parts of the Europe, where they actually ban food coloring additives, over there they usually will use a fruit colorant substitute. So if it's red, it's from a raspberry extract. Whereas here we actually use chemically synthesized additives, right? And colorants,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I always think try and start by replacing those staples that we assume are staples, to something more natural. Like, so for breakfast, instead of the quick cereal, a yogurt is fine, some fresh fruit is fine, a smoothie is fine, and making sure they're getting protein. So eggs, those are all pretty good alternatives, right? In your selection of processed meats, be very careful to avoid things that have nitrates and nitrites, which you'll very often find in bacon, even turkey bacon. So reading labels for your kid. Whole oatmeal for breakfast with some fruit and some granola is totally acceptable. And guess what? Leftover dinner is perfectly fine for kids in the morning. That's how a lot of countries still have breakfast. It's totally fine in the morning. It does not have to be high carb, high sugar, orange juice, and things like that. So it really is a reshift in thinking about providing nutrient dense, rich foods to your kids. And it's basically anything that you can cook for the most part, right? Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This is perfect. So, obviously, the more whole food it is, the better. Has more fiber, is more natural, less chemicals. It's the best for you. And I think the main challenge nowadays in this day and age we live in is that we are all are busy. Our kids are busy. We are busy. But you brought out very good points of replacing, the cereal, which is extremely processed and full of
Yeah.
sugar. Sugar is the other thing, right, that disturbs
Yes.
microbiome. Like orange juice is not healthy. We think it's healthy.
Right, right, right.
full of sugar. So
Yeah.
instead, replacing them with real fruits, right?
Yes.
Cuties, oranges, and things like that, right? And
Absolutely.
teaching kids, like you said early on, drinking water instead of sugary drinks early on.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
Teaching them eating whole food instead of processed food early on. um,
Yes.
and then how about snacks? That's the other challenge I see in children. There are a lot of unhealthy snacks in the public
Yes,
schools.
yes, yes,
What
yes.
can
You know, there
families
is
do?
something to be also said about the concept of snacking,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When and why do we need these snacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
understanding why your kids need to snack is really important. Is it that they're not getting full at breakfast or at a meal? Is it that we're giving them so much high carb that we're seeing sugar spikes? And I'm talking about fast carbs, right? And so why the need to have that snack in between? The best snacks are going to stay, of course, the same, right? If your kid can tolerate nuts, and I know a lot of them can't, like so a lot of we're seeing a lot of peanut and nut sensitivity, you want to avoid that. But you can do a healthy cheese. There's nothing wrong. Cheese bits will be totally fine. Things like edamame, high in protein, wonderful option. Greek yogurt, excellent snack for kids. Fruit. So there's so many alternatives besides something in a package that you have to do with your children, right? So there are many alternatives, but I think the one question is every time a kid has to snack, you always have to ask yourself the questions: did they receive a nutrient rich food, and are they well hydrated? Because sometimes a child saying I'm hungry, it's actually I'm thirsty,
Mm-hmm.
and they're losing that sense of satiety. So I think
Right.
that is helpful too, to ask those questions. Yeah.
Right.
and,
Absolutely.
and we know that snacking is an issue, right? Even as adults, we snack as children, we snack as adults, and snacking is like the number one cause of weight gain, is really
Right.
snacking all the
Absolutely.
time, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. If our children are fed high protein, um, full, high fiber, whole food, they are less likely to be hungry. They are going to stay fuller longer and decrease the need for snacking, right? I think the food
Absolutely.
industry has made it, in a way, it's marketing. I think
That
that
your kid
it
needs a
seems like
snack.
a
Yes,
snack,
yes,
right? They
yes.
need
But
snack.
I grew up in Ghana, West Africa, and there was no snack. The snack may have been you're walking on the way home from school and your
Exactly.
friend's house has a mango tree and you grab one, and that's your snack. But there was no prepared snack.
Not at
It
all.
was just like,
Exactly.
you just wait for dinner time and we all eat together. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think the food industry has marketed this as a need, but I'm not sure it's really a need. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, when our body is devoid of the nutrient dense, nutrient rich food, it's craving for nutrition, right? So let's say your child had a cereal, which is high in sugar, processed, less fiber, is going to be hungry before it's time for lunch, right? And then
Absolutely.
what do we give for snacks? Sometimes it's chips, it's crackers, which is the same
Cookies.
thing,
Yes, it's the same
which
thing.
lacks
Absolutely.
nutrition, which lacks
Absolutely.
fiber.
Yes.
It's empty calorie, and
Yeah.
so your body, your brain is still devoid of nutrition.
Yes.
And so fiber is a great way of keeping you fuller longer, right?
Yes.
And as we spoke, it's a prebiotic for your
Your
probiotics,
gut. Yes. Absolutely.
for your gut
Yeah.
health and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are practical ways that your children may not need to snack if they eat nutritious food. We think our food has to be high carb, low fat, but it's been proven that you need a proportion of fat and protein. Actually, healthy fat is good for you, right?
Hmm.
Will keep you fuller longer, not the pro-inflammatory processed fats and
Fats. Yes.
yeah, right, but
Yeah.
more
Absolutely.
natural, like avocado, nuts, olive oil,
Yeah.
fish. Even if you have organic or grass fed butter and things like that. um,
Yes.
are good for you. Your body actually needs healthy fat.
Absolutely.
Your brain, the growing child's brain does need healthy
Yeah,
fat too,
yeah.
right?
And
But I
and kids need carbohydrates a lot more than adults do because they are growing and they need
Mhm.
that energy source from carbs, right? But you
Yes,
want to pick the right type of carbs, right, Dr. Debo? You want to pick
yes,
wholesome carbohydrates, right? Seeded
exactly.
bread, whole wheat is actually
Mhm.
better if your child can tolerate wheat.
Mhm.
You want to pick root vegetables, right? That will have the right type of fiber. That's also a different type of carb, like squash and things like that. So you just want to pick the right types of carbohydrates that are low glycemic index that will sustain your child's nutritional needs and also growth, provide enough calories as well for them. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Practically speaking, this would be replacing your white bread with whole wheat bread, white rice with brown rice, your pasta and stuff. And like you said, oatmeal. Um, there are a lot of healthy carbs, potato, sweet potato,
Yes.
high starch.
Unprocessed.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
you know,
Yes.
fat soluble and insoluble fiber and all of that. Very good. This is super helpful. And I want to reiterate on the drinking water part. I think we all are dehydrated. Recent studies have shown that we need at least half to 1 ounce of our body weight. And most of us are not getting that. so, and so ensuring, teaching kids to want to drink water. Sometimes kids never had water and they don't want to drink any water, so teaching them early on the habits, so that they develop healthier habits as they get older, right? um,
Yeah, water is so important, such a critical part of child's growth and development. From a gastro perspective, we often think of water and like, oh, hydrate and hydrate your kidneys, and but from a GI perspective, water is critical in producing saliva, in producing your digestive gastric juices, in being able to be reabsorbed from the gut so you can have bowel movements and you're not constipated. So it helps from so many things from the GI standpoint, from mouth to anus. And the source of water is super important, right? I mean, really, these days we have to be very honest. Water from a tap is probably not the cleanest source. So make sure you're getting clean source of water. If you can filter your water at home, important to filter your water and look for filtration options for kids. But also know that I don't really, I mean, I like water, but I like water when it's mixed with something. It's great over the summer to have different ways to present the water to the child. So maybe, you want water and put some blueberries and some ginger and some mint just to give it a little bit of a taste. Because some kids just don't like the plain taste of water. There's
right,
some things you can add like crystal light, but I always say add whatever is natural as much as possible. You
right.
can get a lot of taste sensations and smells from ginger, from turmeric, from blueberries, and adding that to the water from mint. That also helps the children's palate in developing what they appreciate when it comes to food, right? Instead of heavy charge of sugar or heavy charge of salt. So tea, if your kid likes tea, hot or cold tea with some mint and a dash of little honey, that's okay. That's also water. So there are different sources of hydration. And remember, fruit is a huge source of hydration, right? There's a lot of fruits that are rich in water, like melons and watermelons for some, that you can give to your kids. That also counts in that half of your body's weight ounces, right?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
it all
Yes.
counts.
Oranges, melons, hydrating fruits. Yes, all the good stuff
Yeah.
that we have forgotten to have it in our house. So I'd recommend families, don't even buy chips, crackers, things like that. If it's in the house, you cannot tell them you cannot have it. Instead, replace them with fruits, cuties, berries, grapes, all of the good stuff, right?
Yes,
Very
yes,
good.
yes.
This is super helpful, Dr. Asamoah. Um, Let me shift our direction a little bit. And can you talk about Where and when can families start developing healthy gut for their children? Does it start in the womb? What are
It
where?
does. I mean, it does. That's a great question, Dr. Adebo. It does start in utero, and it really starts with the health of the parents, right? Mom's health throughout the, so the healthier mom is, the healthier her microbiome will be. The healthier her nutrition is, the healthier the microbiome that she relays off to the child, because that microbiome is really initially acquired during vaginal delivery. So I'm sure you've seen the study between vaginal delivery and
C-section.
C-section. We know that as the child passes through that vaginal birth canal, that is when they are exposed to the mother's vaginal microbiome as well as the rectal, any stool microbiome they're passing through. That's where they get their first source of Bifidio as well as lactobacilli, right? We know that kids who are birthed by C-section usually end up having a microbiome that consists mostly of skin organisms, so staph, but they still have the chance of developing their microbiome later. We know there are differences between children who are breastfed versus children who are formula fed. And breastfed, I mean, when you talk about that first milk, the colostrum, it is a rich source of prebiotic, that's the oligosaccharides, probiotic, that's bifidio and lacto, and the nutrients, micronutrients that the children need. So that colostrum is like, they call
Gold.
it that golden milk.
They
Yeah,
call it
it's
gold milk.
really the
Yeah,
richest source of
liquid gold.
prebiotic and
Yeah.
probiotic, right? And we know that even in formula fed babies now, there are lots of formulas adding prebiotic and probiotics to the formulas because they realize the importance of that. So yeah, I think it starts in utero all the way to actual birth, the passage through the canal or whatever form of delivery, and then also in terms of how if we decide to breastfeed versus formula feed the baby. But there's always an opportunity to improve that microbiome, especially with early reintroduction of food. Like we don't want to delay food reintroduction for too long, right? And we want to introduce foods that we're eating in the household, right? That's something we are getting away from, doing a little bit too much over processing of the food, than really allowing the child to adapt to food they would eat as they grow up. So those are all ways that we see the microbiome change. The microbiome is not um, it is not static, it's very dynamic. It changes day to day, week to week, months to months. It changes based on many things externally that we can do. We know stress affects the microbiome, right? Besides food, we know stress can affect the microbiome. Medications can affect the microbiome. But what the great thing is that you can reshift your microbiome, right? Once you decide, you know what, like Dr. Debo said, I'm not buying cookies, I'm not buying chips, I'm going to try and remove those and replace it with wholesome, clean foods, we do see a shift in the microbiome pretty quickly. Adding more fiber, we'll see a shift in the microbiome. So that's great. We can shift that microbiome in kids pretty easily.
That's
Yeah.
excellent. Yes, that's
Yeah.
great. Good. So let's say, obviously, we know the benefits of breastfeeding, but for whatever reason, if a mom is not able to breastfeed and has to give formula, what are your recommendation on improving the child's gut microbiome? Do you recommend supplementing with probiotics, or what are your
Now,
points?
there are some formulas that have already small amounts of probiotics, but really enrich prebiotics in the base, right? That could certainly be a consideration. But with that, you want to make sure that you know every child is different. So when it comes to that age and formula selections, I think there's so many things mom or dad has to think about. Is my kid sensitive to anything? Do they have a dairy allergy? Do they have a soy allergy? So picking the right formula, this is something you have to really discuss with your pediatrician to help you figure out what's best for your child. And then looking at some enriched prebiotic rich formulas. I think more so the focus is prebiotic than probiotic. When you look at the data, I think the evidence on probiotic is very specific, right? To like our patients with our preemie babies with necrotizing enterocolitis. We definitely know the data is golden there in terms of additional probiotics with Bifidio and lactobacilli. I know there are some ICUs, NICUs who give this automatically probiotics to preemie babies. We know that it reduces the risk of intestinal hyperpermeability, leaky gut, and complications, and even mortality. And so there are benefits there after an infection or after a use of prolonged use of antibiotics. That's where probiotics come in. But on a day to day for a child who is breastfed, my recommendation would be to look at enriched prebiotic enriched supplements, and also try and transition the kid to food. Don't delay that. Try and bring them to food as soon as it's possible, right? Upon guidance of your pediatrician, as soon as possible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Good. Good. That's a great point. So let's talk about gut health and eczema and brain health, if you would. What are some of the things we need to know about that?
Yeah, we know that this is a very extensive, vast topic. So I'll give
Yes.
like just a little synopsis, right? We definitely
Mhm.
know that the gut microbiota, even in kids who were born by C-section, or some children, so kids who were not breastfed. Typically, I think we're seeing a lot of data in kids who are born by C-section,
Mhm.
but we're definitely seeing increased incidence of like allergy, asthma, eczema, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease in our in kids who were not breastfed, and in kids who possibly were born by C-section. So that evidence is pretty clear. And so enriching the microbiome and making sure that we're helping the child develop a healthy microbiome thereafter is really important. When it comes to eczema or atopic children, like there's a combination that's genetic, but we also definitely think that there's a component that is related to the gut microbiota and the immune system of the gut, right? And so when the gut microbiota is off, I hate to say bad, but when there's imbalance, which we also call dysbiosis, we can see that triggering the immune system, where now the immune system is overreacting to so many things, environmental, be it food and whatnot, pollen, everything. It's just overreacting. And then that's where we see the immune hyper response, and children develop things like eczema and atopy. Now, it's not for every child that has eczema, but we can definitely make a correlation that most of our kids with eczema, asthma, allergies, and things like that, often if you check their microbiome, it's a little off. We're going to see certain strains that are hyperproduced, that are, overpopulating, which creates this dysbiosis and imbalance. The same has been said for brain health, right? In terms of stress and anxiety, there's that gut brain axis, primarily because we know that there are some microbiota heavily involved in the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, right? And so if there are imbalances there, then we can also see issues related to brain health. And brain health meaning you're hearing a lot of data right now about children with ADHD, autism, and anxiety type pictures, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And we see
Right.
this in adults, but I'm sure you see it more
Yes.
so in children. And now we are leaning towards really incorporating nutrition into our, treatment protocols. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Good. 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 So, what are practical ways a parent may help their child who, let's say, is taking formula, has really bad eczema, but this baby is only like 2, 3 months old? What would you recommend to?
So, first, I think even with the formula, you want to be careful that the formula itself is not causing an issue, right? That the child
Yeah.
doesn't have a food sensitivity, like a
Mhm.
dairy intolerance, a soy
Mhm.
issue,
Yeah.
making sure there are no emulsifiers there that could be hurting the child.
Mhm.
Adding on prebiotics is certainly very, very helpful, right? They can be very, very helpful for some children, right? There are a few studies looking at the addition of probiotic drops, like Gaia Probiotics has pretty good drops for kids that you can add in, which we've seen beneficial in kids with colic, right? And
Mhm.
poor breakdown of lactose and things like that.
Mhm.
So BioGaia will contain strains like Lactobacillus reuteri, super
Mhm.
helpful.
Mhm.
Strains of Bifidio, very, very helpful. So those can be additional strains to add. But I think
Mhm.
the biggest thing is really if there is anything that can be avoided that you know is a trigger, you want to avoid those. And very often in that age group, it can be a food sensitivity that you have
Mm-hmm.
not identified. It's not, but it's not like you don't have to do any special tests. It's really a process of elimination and
Right.
working with your pediatrician to see, hey, is there a particular food?
Mm-hmm.
My experience as a mom was my child has eczema and allergies.
Mm-hmm.
And very early on, we identified he had a peanut allergy. Very early, we identified at 8 months because he
Mm-hmm.
tried to eat my pad Thai food, and he had never eaten it before.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of, not a lot of gut symptoms, but he would often complain of tummy issues after eating certain meals. And it took us a long time, and we identified it was egg.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he would eat those foods, his eczema would flare. So you
Mm-hmm.
always have to look at. So once we took egg out of his diet, his eczema just got better, like
Mm-hmm.
just got better. So I do really believe, as an integrative gastroenterologist, that food does play a role, and
Mm-hmm.
identify, especially when our children start eating more,
Mm-hmm.
identifying what could be. So I think these issues usually happen once they start eating food, like more
Solid
food,
food. Solid.
solid foods. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right, yeah. So when it comes to elimination, do you have a process of first eliminate lactose, then egg and things or nuts? Do you have a
Yes, yes,
process to follow?
absolutely. Yes, yes. Depending on what you've reincorporated,
Mm-hmm.
starting with dairy is a huge one. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a very, very big one. And then
Mm-hmm.
the major ones, right? It's dairy, soy, eggs, right? Don't
Mm-hmm.
forget about wheat. Some of our kids do have a wheat allergy itself or a sensitivity. So as you bring wheat in, you want
Mm-hmm.
to look at those, yeah, as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. Um, so when it comes to ADHD, autism, and gut health, what are practical ways families can help their child? We talked some of the things, but if you would summarize it for our families.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that is a very wide discussion. We could literally have a whole other discussion on ADHD and podcasts and autism. Again, I want to say I'm not a pediatrician,
Yes.
pediatric gastroenterology. I'm an adult gastroenterology. So, but what I have learned about and read about is that it is extremely difficult for parents of children with ADHD and autism to handle nutrition on their own. I think the support of an excellent dietitian or nutritionist is key. One, because we know that our kids with autism and ADHD have a lot of differences in palate in terms of food texture, food smells, what they can tolerate, how the food makes them feel. So there's a very brain gut connection with food and how they react to food. So it's easy to say, stop this, don't give your kid this. But I meet with a lot of parents of children who have ADHD or autism who says, my kid only eats this. And if I don't feed them this, what are they going to eat? Right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a challenge, and it's not something that I feel like I want to put that kind of pressure on
Mm-hmm.
parents. They need the support of a community or professional they can work with, because already working with your child with ADHD and autism is not easy. Changing the diet and the nutrition perspective, what I will say is it takes time. It's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And
Right.
just like Dr. Adebo says, you want to replace before you remove. You
Mm-hmm.
have to find something else that's an option that will be palatable for them
Mm-hmm.
before you remove. But the biggest ones I will say: wheat, right? Gluten,
Mm-hmm.
dairy,
Mm-hmm.
sugar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Those are the biggest culprits. So you can start off by saying, okay, we're not going to do added sugar. Maybe we're going to do 100% organic raw honey, or we're
Mm-hmm.
going to do just 100% organic maple syrup. Like, so we're going to remove first, replace with this, and see how it goes, and then give it some time, right? But there's sugar in everything, especially the processed cookies and things that they eat. So it's a process. It's a
Mm-hmm.
process. I don't think there's an easy, like, and it's not a one size
Which,
fits all, as you know, Dr. Adebo.
yeah, for
Some
sure.
for one person, it could be this for another person. So, in my adult experience, I do work with adults with autism and ADHD, and I
Mm-hmm.
have, for example, an adult 30-year-old who has terrible acid reflux, horrible, and we
Mm-hmm.
on all sorts of acid blocker medications, and we're getting close to. And the one thing he cannot give up is the Dr. Pepper, which he drinks 3 times a day.
Oh,
And
yeah,
he said, I'm willing to do everything else, but Dr. V, I cannot. This is my thing. This is my Dr. Pepper. I need my Dr. Pepper. And so I realized how difficult for mom it
yeah,
is. Yet,
can be.
because this is, yeah, it's the connection with this is a brain connection. It's almost what the Dr. Pepper does to his brain. It's less, it's what the taste and the dopamine receptors do to the brain that I
Hmm.
think that why that pull is there to constantly for that. And that
Hmm.
is sugar, right? In a lot of ways, and
Yes,
how sugar affects
sugar
your
and the caffeine and stuff, right?
exactly.
Finding a way to replace
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
support is needed. It's not an easy process. It's
yeah.
really well, there's some amazing dietitians and pediatricians who do great work so that our parents don't feel isolated tackling this alone. Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, that's a good point. Especially with autism, obviously, texture is a big thing. And we see that all the time. And I think um, working with a speech therapy, occupational therapy on the texture
Yes.
and flavor
Yes.
essence is one. And I think
Yeah.
most of our kids with autism do see, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and
Yes.
sometimes dietitian, not all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is a great summary. The texture and the food choice makes things complex, yes, but just overall though, like we spoke about, a whole food, clean food, high fiber, maybe wanting and fermented food, right? Would you say
Yes, yes, yes.
something
And
different?
finding ways to incorporate vegetables into everyday meals where the vegetables are somewhat hidden. There are some wonderful cookbooks about how to feed your kids healthy vegetables in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in the event of artificial intelligence, if you put that in any
Mm-hmm.
GPT app, you will get amazing recipes, right? Of how
Yes,
to, yeah. One
yes.
thing I personally did for my children is really use smoothies as often as I can to
Mm-hmm.
incorporate vegetables so they get very, very used to it, right? And
Yes.
then also trying diverse fruits and vegetables and
Mm-hmm.
seeing what your kids enjoy and then
Mm-hmm.
giving them more of that. So I have
Mm-hmm.
one daughter who absolutely will kill for broccoli, and
Mm-hmm.
I have another one who loves beans. And so every time I cook, I try and make sure I have either option for
Right.
them so
Yes.
that they can incorporate it. So
Yeah.
easy, quick recipes. There are great, great, great cookbooks. You can find a lot of things on GPT right now. If you put
Mm-hmm.
in, my kid does not do wheat, dairy, or this. I want to incorporate these vegetables in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
You will
Yeah.
get a recipe. That's
Very
super easy to
Yeah,
make.
excellent. That's excellent. Very good. Good, good, good. Yeah. So I think to summarize, our babies may be on formula and then they get the pureed solid food, which are processed and has sugar and chemicals. And so you can start early by teaching your children to eat whole food. I'm a big advocate of baby led weaning, where you can feed your child as you eat with them, right? Cut up some veggies as long as they are cooked well. Just make sure they're not going to choke on them, but teach them eating healthy food from early on. They don't necessarily need the packaged puree food. You can also make purees at home too, cleaner and whole. And then incorporating water, like as we talked about. This has been great, Dr. Asamo. And is there any departing wisdoms or things you'd like to share?
Yeah, yeah, no, this has been a great conversation, and I hope it's really helpful to your audience. I think that it going back to simpler days, simpler products, nothing too complicated is great. And I also believe that you don't need to spend a lot of money on probiotics and other like added supplements because it may not be necessary. You may be able to get everything you need from a healthy nutrition, a wholesome, organic, clean diet is basically all that's needed. And usually it goes back to the basics, right? Back to the basics is what I say. Yeah.
Excellent. This has been great. So, if people want to learn more about you and your services, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on most social media platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. I also have a private Facebook group called Natural Gut Relief, where we talk about everything related to healing the gut naturally. We probably should have you on and do a little bit more about pediatrics because and
Yeah,
children and gut care in kids. I think
yeah,
that's super important.
that makes
And so they can join me there, and I'm happy to share the link with you. But my practice is an adult practice. Maybe one day we'll hire a pediatric gastroenterologist. I'm not sure. But we are based in Houston, in Katy, West Houston, Texas. And we accept most major insurances as well.
very good. If you'd like to be healthy in your gut or microbiome, or if you have any GI issue, any any problem when it comes to GI, either it's reflux or anything, Dr. Vivian Asamoah is the person to go. She is in Katy. You do offer virtual visits and stuff too, even if they are
I
virtual.
do. I do. We do offer virtual visits. Yes, we do.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
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 Mark was playing your website and all of that too. We'll be sure to leave all your links down below this video. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Vivian Asamo. We should continue this conversation again.
Absolutely. An honor to be with your audience. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Adebo.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.